to get some other people, give them a chance to join, and then we can get started.
Say go, Johannes. when it's a go.
I don't mind if we join, or if we start now, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Is that good for you?
Yes, thank you. So hi, everyone, and thank you for joining today's user group. We have three very interesting talks today. The first talk is about two-way integration of contacts between Sitecore XDB and Microsoft Dynamics in real time, delivered by Kate and Anna from Delete Kagool. The second talk is by Daniel Ionita, sales engineer at Sitecore. And then the third talk is from Akshay Sura, talking about the Sitecore Experience Edge headless content delivery at scale. So without further ado, we'll begin with the first talk of today. And it's a two-way integration of contacts between Sitecore XDB and Microsoft Dynamics in real time. So Kate, if you share your screen, please. Okay. Can everybody see the screen?
I can, yeah.
Excellent. So if we go straight to slide 2, Kate. So first, a few words about Delete Kagool. So we are Sitecore Platinum Partner. We are Content Hub Specialized Partner. We have 4 Sitecore MVPs, over 100 Sitecore experts, 420 completed Sitecore projects, and 14 global Sitecore awards. So we have 3 speakers today on this talk. Kate, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Orlova. I'm Sitecore Strategy MVP, and I'm Head of Solutions Architecture at Delete Kagool.
Next is Anna. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Gevel. I'm Sitecore Strategy MVP and Solutions Architect at Delete Kagool.
And finally, a little bit of me. My name is Polly, and I am an advanced Sitecore marketer, and I'm a digital marketing director at Delete Kagool. So Anna and Kate will present the technical nuances of integration between Sitecore and Microsoft Dynamics. And I will introduce you to some challenges of a typical CRM setup and highlight missing opportunities without a single customer view. Sorry, my child decided to walk into my office straight away. So here's what we're going to cover today. Objectives of single customer view, two-way integration between Sitecore and Microsoft Dynamics, and key achievements of our tried and tested approach for this integration. Let's begin with our objectives. First, we need to make all experience profile data gathered in Sitecore XDB to be available in Microsoft Dynamics in real time so that we can enrich our CRM customer record there. We need XDB contacts and scores from all profiles to be published from Sitecore into CRM. And ultimately, this will help us to improve online recommendations and personalization on site based on customers' online and offline activity. So let's take a look at a typical example of data captured offline that can be sat in CRM. So here are a few screenshots of inquiries captured offline by a real estate brand. We all know that users browse large websites in a different way. In an example of a real estate brand, users often look at properties which are completely irrelevant to their situational details. However, when the same people talk to estate agents on the phone or in person, are more specific. They're more specific about their requirements, budget, and all of the information that really matters. So, and being able to pick on that information gathered offline and to use it to improve customer experience on the website is key. So user profile information naturally is gathered in our Sitecore XDB while we browse a website. But when a user submits a form, we get their email address or another identifier. Using that information, we can search through CRM records for that email address or an identifier to glean any additional information captured by an agent over the phone or in-person visit to see if any more of that can be added to enhance the experience. Now, if we take a look at this middle example here, so you could see that this particular user is specifically and explicitly interested in a 2-bedroom property in close proximity to Cambridge Centre with a budget around 500,000. Now, during multiple website visits, the same person can look at properties which are completely outside of their price bracket. For example, it could be a house at the end of the road, just out of interest, or their neighbor's house, just because they want to see what it looks like. And typically, such dream browsing behavior could completely skew their profile, but we can correct it with the data from the CRM. So next, let's take a closer look how we extend Sitecore Experience Profile. And this is where I'm going to hand you over to Kate. Kate, over to you, please.
Thank you, Polly. So we bring accurate user information from a CRM into Sitecore, and we send the user online activity from Sitecore back to CRM. You can see that we connect Sitecore and Microsoft Dynamics through an external API. It's a two-way connection, which works well in real time. And most of you will probably think now, why third-party API is used here when there is a standard Sitecore connected to Microsoft Dynamics? So my answer is yes, of course, you could use the standard Sitecore Dynamics connector, and the integration principle would be the same. More and more clients nowadays target their customers in multiple channels, such as Sitecore website, native mobile app, social channels, portals, and aggregators such as Rightmove and Zoopla, as you've seen on previous screens. And all data needs to be brought in together and syndicated into a single customer view in CRM. And when dealing with multiple channels, it is advisable to use a middle layer for data exchange, because there is not just only Sitecore website and CRM, there is an umbrella of different services within the client in-house systems. As you can see on our example, in Sitecore, we have contacts and profiles where we store user online activity. And the red arrow shows how we flush this data, specifically profile scores, from Sitecore to Microsoft Dynamics. And in Microsoft Dynamics, we have contacts, offline user activity, and queries captured during telephone calls or physical visits into a branch. And the blue arrow shows how we push this data from CRM to Sitecore. And as Polly mentioned earlier, a more complete customer information helps us to deliver more accurate personalization on the website. Let's take a look at how the key elements are configured in Sitecore. Here we have an example from a solution for a real estate portal. This is a profile created for a property type taxonomy. It consists of 4 keys for residential, commercial, development, land, and farm, because this website specifically buys and sells real estates in all these categories. And there is one-to-one mapping between keys and profile cards. And for each profile card, we set scores. So you can see them now highlighted on the right. And here is an example of a typical experience profile where a user gained certain scores based on his activity on the website. For example, this user has browsed clearly more residential property content rather than commercial or development land. And we're trying to take an advantage of this data in Sitecore and bring this back into Microsoft Dynamics. Let's take a look at what data we push exactly from Sitecore to CRM and what we receive back. In our example, the user is clearly interested in properties for sale. We can see that he has scored 20 points in for sale profile value and 0 into rent. But the type of property he's interested in is mixed. There is a clear interest in commercial property, a little bit in residential, and some in development land. And we send these exact scores to CRM and receive back additional information such as registration for events, business division, which owns a customer record, subscription to publication, and professional services. Now Anna will talk us through the technical implementation at code level using XConnect capabilities and alternative solution with all the Sitecore versions before XConnect. Anna, it's over to you, please.
Thank you, Kate. We would like to show you a few code examples just to illustrate how pattern cards and profile values can be retrieved from Sitecore with and without XConnect, and also how to update XDB contacts with offline data that can be captured in CRM. Let's start from the approach that doesn't require XConnect. It can be used if you want, for example, read profile values in real time while your user session is active, or for example, if you run Sitecore in CMS only mode without XDB. In this case, you can keep XDB deactivated, but enable tracking via config, and then profile values will be accessible during user session. There are two places to read this data from. Either from a current interaction that is in the session or from the contact behavior profile, and I will explain the differences between the two. So let's start from the current session. It contains both historical profile values and the data from the current session. So in this method, it's our first choice. So we start by taking the interaction, looking at the profiles and selecting the profile by its profile name. And then we take the matched pattern card ID. Sitecore does all the matching logic. We just take the ID. And another option is to get this data from the current contact, again, based on the user session. But in this case, it will only be historical data. It will not include the current session. And again, the same, we take the pattern ID and we just at the bottom of this method, you can see we just retrieve the pattern card item object from the marketing definition items and return it from this item. We can take, for example, pattern card name or maybe some additional information that is configured in Sitecore. The second method we wanted to show is to get profile scores. Again, it can be done in the same way via current session or from the contact. Here we're just showing the contact variant. Again, as with the previous method, we start by taking the profile definition from the marketing definitions table. Then we'll look at the current contact, look at his behavior profiles. We iterate through the collection of keys and get scores for each of the profile keys. And then we just return a dictionary of keys and values that will be basically our profile key name and then the value as Kate shown, where we had, for example, residential 20 points and so on. And then it's also possible to use XConnect capabilities to get similar information from contacts facet. This approach is especially useful if, in case your integration doesn't have access to visitor session, or maybe you want to use a scheduled task to sync this data on a regular basis. For example, overnight you run a job that pushes this data to the CRM. As we're working with the out-of-the-box client from Sitecore, we start by establishing connection to the XConnect API. Then we read contacts, we read the contact by contact ID, and we instruct API to extend this contact with the behavior profile facet. Then if the contact is found, we will take this facet, and from this facet we'll be able to take this course. And for this method for pattern cards, we're specifically interested in our profile and the matched pattern ID. For example, it can be, let's say, property type, commercial. And as we're working with an API here, it's important to handle exceptions, log any error messages that you might get, for example, if there are any connectivity issues, and maybe write some retry logic in case there was an issue and you want to push the data after maybe a period of time. And the second method with XConnect is the same as without XConnect. We're getting profile scores, all the different points for each profile key. As previously, again, we are establishing connection, we're getting our contact extended with the behavior profile data, and then we take the profile we're interested in, and then we iterate through the collection of values. Again, take profile, a key name, and the profile score value for this profile, and return in the same format as prior to XConnect, just a dictionary of keys and values. And the same as with previous method, remember to handle your exceptions and log messages and retry logic. And finally, we've got an example of how to update the XDB contact with the CRM data that can be captured offline. In our case, we needed a custom facet because out of the box, there were no fields that would store this type of information. So again, we connect to XConnect API, we get our contact, and then we send our custom CRM data facet key to the API to try to get this facet. And in case it doesn't exist, we create a new object. It's important to try reading data from XConnect first before trying to write it, just because XConnect relies on concurrency token to avoid collisions. It covers all objects, contacts, interactions, facets, all of them have concurrency tokens. So whenever you try to push some information, try getting the first so you can read with the same token. In this example, we've just shown you a few fields, but there can be more. We're doing our mapping logic, then we set facets, and finally we submit this data to XConnect, and then it will be available in Sitecore and can be used with standard personalization rules to adjust content on the website and show certain elements depending on the different fields that we have in our facet. And now Polly will summarize what we've covered today and what we have achieved. Polly, over to you.
Yes, so in this presentation, you have seen how CRM contacts are enriched with user online activity from Sitecore XDB contacts in real time, how Sitecore Experience Profile is extended with customer activity captured offline and stored in Microsoft Dynamics to achieve a single customer view, a truly single customer view, which is achieved, of course, for the CRM and mainly stored in the CRM. So, and this approach allows you not only to deliver a more accurate personalization and recommendation on site for website visitors, it also allows us to provide a more insight to staff on the ground about their customers when they log into CRM. Before they're making any calls to potential hot prospects, they can get a glance at what they have been doing online and use that information to guide their conversations. So it's really powerful. I hope you found this presentation useful, and if you have any questions, you can find our contact details on the next slide. So thank you very much for listening.
All right, thanks all three. Before we switch over to the next presenter, are there any questions? I can see Sumit on the chat is saying, how are you calling this? API security, etc. our task?
Yeah, I can start from this one, and Kate, you can even if you want. So it depends on the approach you are taking here. For example, if you are going with the session data, it depends where you run this logic. If it happens on your content delivery server, just at the moment when, for example, someone registers on the website or submits a form, and then this data is just available, it runs on the server side. But if in case you are using XConnect, then yes, XConnect requires a client certificate authorization. So you will need to use a client certificate for this. What else? For example, if you have an external tool that you use for integration, then again, it will need, for XConnect, it will need to use the client certificate. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Great.
Perfect. There seem to be no other questions in the chat. So if there are no other questions, I guess we can go to the next presenter.
Yeah. So the next presenter for today is Daniel Ionita, sales engineer at Sitecore. And his talk today is called Expanding Sitecore Content Hub Capabilities Using the .NET SDK. So in this presentation, you will see an overview of Sitecore Content Hub integrating with downstream systems and a detailed demonstration of combining Content Hub DAM with Microsoft Office PowerPoint, which will ultimately allow users to insert DAM images into slides directly from PowerPoint. Over to you, Daniel.
It's perfect. Thank you, Polly. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay. Please let me know if you can see a man on a longboard.
Yes,
we can.
Cool. So hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Ionita, a sales engineer here at Sitecore UK, mainly focusing on the Content Hub product. Interestingly enough, in my previous role, I was working on developing a platform very similar to the digital asset management module in Content Hub. Mainly it was with the focus on video asset management. And I can safely say it is much easier to expand on Content Hub's capabilities rather than developing your own platform from scratch. That being said, today I would like to talk to you about expanding Sitecore Content Hub capabilities. Also, my email address is on the slide. So if you have any questions about what we've seen today or anything else related to Content Hub, feel free to send me an email or contact me directly on LinkedIn. Now, in order to better understand what's possible inside and outside Content Hub, I'd first like to go through all the integration options we have available in Content Hub. Then I would show you in more detail how an integration with an external platform such as PowerPoint would look like. Then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time left for questions. Now, hopefully by now you all know what Content Hub is, and also that a solution like this, it's all good, but it's not really complete if you can't integrate with other systems that an organization has already invested their money in. So in Content Hub, we have a few options for communicating with downstream systems such as Instagram, Mail, Sitecore, Salesforce, or even PowerPoint for this matter. So in this presentation, I'll be covering most of the integration points, but for more details, I strongly suggest checking the documentation at docs.stylelabs.com. And the first option that we have is the concept of triggers and actions. So for example, in Content Hub, you can configure a trigger using the UI in the platform. So no code is required for that. And that trigger could be waiting for an asset to be approved. Then once the trigger is activated, it could fire an action. So there are a number of actions available in the platform, but the one I use the most by far is the API call action. So combining these two, you could create an automatic process that is posting all the approved assets that are tagged as social media, for example, to your social media platforms. In the interest of time, I'm not going to show you these, but as you can see in this screenshot, there are a few types of actions. So as I mentioned, we have action script, which allows you to run a C# script, or we have API calls, which allows you to make various API calls. So you have post, get, and so on. And also some actions for communicating with Azure services such as Event Hub or Service Bus. And when it comes to the triggers, as you can see in this other screenshot, you can create really advanced conditions for triggering with conditional logic, again, without any code, just drag and drop. And this particular trigger that you see here is waiting for an asset to be linked to CMP content, well, to CMP content piece. So we're saying basically in plain English, if the rendition current value preview and status equals to completed, and the CMP content linked to asset added item is not empty. And then we also have an or here. I just need to move that. And then we, again, another and saying renditions, added item, preview, and status, this time, again, equals to completed. And then for the content linked asset, we say if the current value is not empty. So as you can see, really easy to configure triggers. There's lots of options. But yeah, that's the triggers. And the second integration type is the direct connectors. So for our digital asset management module, or DAM for short, and content marketing platform module, or CMP for short, which essentially allows users to use assets from Content Hub in one of those platforms without having to switch. And when it comes to the Sitecore Experience Platform connector, user can add images to a web page using the DAM connector, and also send articles created in CMP to the Sitecore content tree just by clicking a button. And we also have direct connectors for some Adobe Creative Cloud products and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Now, if you're interested in learning more about these, please check the link at the top of this image where you can find all the details about these connectors, or you could simply Google Sitecore Content Hub connectors. There's no need to write this down right now. We will share these slides and recording of this presentation so you can check the links afterwards. And now the third option, which is one of my favorites, is the REST APIs and .NET SDK, which, as you can imagine, is more suitable for developers. So one example that I always use for the REST API is this scenario where you would use the API to pull data from a third-party product content like Amazon, and then you sync it with Content Hub so the marketeers can use that data in their campaigns. I've also used the API in the past to create a single page application in Vue.js with the search bar, very simple, nothing advanced, but with the search bar, which allowed users to see assets from Content Hub based on a specific search query. And now I'm going to show you how I use the .NET SDK to allow users to use Content Hub's pre-approved assets inside the PowerPoint slides without having to switch platforms again, so saving some time. I'll get to the code shortly and explain to you how the various components work. But in this animation, you can see how the end user would interact with this integration. So they would click on the add-in button in the top right corner, search for something. In our case, we're searching for a logo. Then by clicking on one of the search results, the asset is added to the slide directly. Now, without these integrations, users typically would have to go to Content Hub, search for the logo asset, download it locally, and then you'll need to add it to the slide manually. So as you can imagine, this helps save a bit of time. And before I go into the code and show you how I've managed to do this, I just wanted to point out that before doing this integration, I had no experience at all with .NET or C# development. So I wouldn't be able to give you guidance on best practices. This session is more to show what's possible. So if I could do it in a few days, then I'm sure you guys can make it even better in no time. Now, in terms of front-end HTML components, as you can see here, we have the search input field and a div container that shows all the results. And then we have a footer at the bottom. At the moment, it's not playing, but you'll see that there's a footer at the bottom, which has some text. Now I'm gonna switch to the next slide. So all the code can be found at this URL together with the short guide that I wrote. Again, this is something that I created for custom POC. It's not production ready code or anything like that, but it would definitely help you get started with an integration like this much faster. And also in terms of technicalities, it's important to remember that this is now using the binary files rather than the public links functionality. And the reason you would want to do it this way is to allow users to use those PowerPoint slides offline. Because in case you, well, in case you're using the public links, that obviously you'd need an online connection. But if offline is not a requirement, then using the public links, it's definitely more beneficial, because the links would update automatically every time you update the asset in the DAM and so on. Now I'm just going to click on here. As I said, you can also clone this code and start using it yourself. And I have a short guide as well. So to try it yourself, obviously you need to clone the repository, and then you need to make sure you have all the prerequisites installed. So if I just scroll down to prerequisites, you can see you'll need obviously Office 2016 or later, so you can have PowerPoint, and then you'd need a Content Hub instance, and ideally 3.4 or above in terms of version, and you need admin rights. And the reason you need admin rights is because you need to create an OAuth client, and I'm going to show you shortly how you do that. You also need to install Node.js. Apologies about the versions. I just installed the latest one, and that seemed to work for me. And then you also need to install Visual Studio 2019 with the Office SharePoint development workload installed. And that would allow you to basically use the PowerPoint SDK. Once you install your dependent prerequisites, then you can go to the NuGet package manager for the solution, hit restore, which will add all your dependencies. And then the only change that you'll have to do is inside the clients, and specifically the mClientFactory.cs. And in here, you would need to add those credentials that you get basically at the in Content Hub. So if I now switch to Content Hub, I'll show you shortly how you need to create that. So yeah, this is the Content Hub instance that I've used for this demonstration. So if you just navigate to Manage, and then from here, if we go to the OAuth clients, we should load shortly. So OAuth clients right here. And then from here, you'll see all the clients that you have. Unfortunately, you cannot use a client that is already created. You'll have to create your own one, but it's very simple. So if you just click on plus OAuth client, in here, you'd have to give it a name, an ID, and a secret, which you'll have to use in the C# file that I was talking to you about. And then for redirect URL, I usually use the stylabs.io. And then for client types, I suggest selecting all of them. And then most importantly, you need to add the user right at creation. So the user that you'd use for your client, you'd have to assign it in here. So now if we go back to the code, once you create this, it would look something like the one that I have right here. And then you can just copy all these fields and then add them in the mClientFactory. Yeah. So if I just navigate to that right now, you will see. So we go to clients. You'll see that this is where you can add the details. And basically, what this does, it creates your OAuth client and establishes connection with Sitecore Content Hub. And then from here, you can use this client to make queries and so on. And I'll show you shortly how that happens. But other two important files, as I said, are the HTML and JavaScript files. So if I just quickly navigate here, you'll see that I have exactly what we've seen previously in the video. So we have the input field, which is basically just a normal input field with the ID my input. And then we have a grid container where I'm adding those search results. And then a footer, this is the one that says your assets right where you need them most. And then this is an extra thing which you haven't seen yet, but it basically just, it's there to show us some notifications. For example, when it fails, you would say error or so on. And then most importantly, this is where, let's say, all the action happens in terms of the visual stuff and the JavaScript file. So the first function that we have, it's first hiding the notification component that I was telling you about, and then it just takes the input and stores it as a keyword in the variable keyword, and then we use that variable to send it to the search function. So if I just quickly navigate to search, you'll see that in here we call one of our controllers. So I have created two controllers, and the reason I did that is because one of them, I want to have one that shows the search results with the thumbnail, so it loads a bit faster. And then the second one actually gets the original image file and adds it. So after we get those results, those files, then we append those images. So if you go to append image, you'll see that all it does, it takes the image, which comes as a base64 string, and then it appends it to that image field. And then from there on click, every time we click on one of those images, it takes the image ID and it sends it to the insert from function. And if we scroll up, you'll see that insert from, again, what it does, it calls the photo controller, passing the entity ID. And then from there, it calls, well, after it gets the results, it calls the insert image from base64 string, which basically adds the image. So if we look at this, this is the example I found on Microsoft websites with the code examples, but you can see that it basically adds that image to the slide. This is how you would do it. In here, for example, if you'd want, you could change this. If you want to add text, you could change this to text. I believe there's about 3 options you have here. But yeah, just so you know, this is where you would do it. And then if we go to controllers, this is where the logic happens and where we query stuff from Content Hub. So if I go to the source controller, this is what we're calling first time. As you can see, initially we get that keyword that we're passing, and then we use that keyword to create a query. It's important to remember that this is a fairly standard query just that I use just to test this. There's a lot more options. So as you can see at the moment, I'm just checking where the title contains the keywords. But obviously, if you would want to expand on this, you would want to search through the metadata and perhaps other fields as well. And then once we create this query, we actually create the client, and then we use that client and pass the query, which will return some assets. Then we're looping through all those assets. So with this, we're looping through all the assets, extract the file name from each one of them, and then we get the rendition thumbnail. So as I said, when you show the search results, you wouldn't want to show basically the original file. It's better to show thumbnails because it loads a bit faster. And then we basically download the image file locally. We download async, and then we add that to a file stream, which we then add to our images model together with the name and ID. So the ID, as I said, the name is not really relevant. I'm not using it at the moment, but the ID is relevant because then it would be passed to the photo controller. So if we look at the photo controller right now, you'll see that it's fairly similar to what we've seen in the search controller. The only difference right now is that we don't create that query because we have the target ID already. And then we just get that target ID and again, extract file name, description. And then this time we get the download original rendition rather than the thumbnail one. And then again, we add that to a file stream, we convert it into a base64 string, and then we return it to our JavaScript file, which then adds it to the actual slide. Now, that was it in terms of the code. We've seen that all the components that make this integration work, but just to reiterate, the search bar, you've seen here, it's how you would display your search, well, it's what's used to pass the keyword. And then in that div, you would put your search results. You would use the home HTML file if you want to make changes to the structure of the page. For example, maybe you want to display your results in a list rather than a table. And then inside the client m.client factory, you'll see that that's responsible for communicating with Content Hub, and then the JavaScript file that adds the images. Now, before we get to questions, the last thing I would like to talk about is Experience Edge. This one is one of the latest features in Content Hub 4.0, and I'm sure Akshay will talk about this in more detail. But at its core, Experience Edge is a set of services for headless content delivery at scale. And basically, it provides a GraphQL endpoint, which organizations can use to deliver their content to multiple channels. Whether it's a single page application in Next.js or a mobile app in React Native, the GraphQL endpoint makes it really easy to deliver to those channels.
Daniel, sorry. Just as an FYI, we can't see the slide for this.
I apologize. That's the problem of having multiple screens.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I hope that's correct right now.
Yes,
yeah, so as I said, you would use the Experience Edge to deliver to those channels through the GraphQL endpoint. And what I wanted to really say with this is that all these integration points that you've seen here can also be combined. So I know that many companies create content for different locales. With this integration point, you could create a solution which uses the triggers to fire an automatic content translation action, then use the API to update that content in CMP with the new language, then deliver it to a mobile app using the GraphQL endpoint in Experience Edge. This is just an example, but hopefully you get the idea. And that was my talk. Thank you very much. And please let me know if there's any questions.
There is a question in the chat from Tom. Is integration with Eloqua possible? So Content Hub data could be used in Eloqua mails. Have you seen anyone else doing this?
I haven't seen this before, but as long as the other platform also has a REST API, an integration should look exactly like the integration that I showed you now. As I said, we have not only the REST API, but .NET SDK and also the JavaScript SDK. So definitely there would be an option for that as well. As I said, I haven't used it in the past, but if the platform has a REST API, then there shouldn't be any problems integrating with that.
Anyone else?
Excellent.
Any other questions?
I started typing, I'll better ask it now. Thank you, Daniel. Quite a great and practical example. I'm trying to think further, and obviously you mentioned about fallback with offline version, so I can continue building up my slides and using images from Content Hub. So hopefully you have this task in your future roadmap, but I would like to confirm whether it will be easy, doable to trigger somehow any updates. If, for example, I embedded an image and that image got updated following day, how I can trigger any updates or even notifications in my PowerPoint.
Yes, first of all, I just wanted to clarify, this is nothing on the roadmap. This is basically something that I've done for a custom POC just to see if it's possible. But definitely this scenario could happen. So as I said, at the moment, I'm using the binary files. But if you would use the public link, so using the same client that I showed you, instead of downloading the file itself, you could get the public link, which you then insert into your PowerPoint slide. And then using the public links, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but basically the public link, it's a version of your asset hosted publicly in a CDN, and then it keeps track. So for example, let's say you upload a new version of that image, the same public link would have the new version of your image. And in terms of notifications, I'm not sure, probably that would be something that you'd have to trigger with some sort of event. But you could notify in Content Hub if that's something that you would want. So let's say one example I can think of is every time somebody from your company adds an image using that add-in, it could populate the impact field saying that it's been used in this PowerPoint slide. That would be one scenario. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, definitely. I'm just trying to think about selling this idea to our clients, and obviously it will be a good use case of trying to create another channel of reusing the same master database of images, not just only on their website, but of their internal assets or something else.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I started doing it in the first place, because we all use images in our slides and we have Content Hub, but then I saw, why not just use an add-in? Yeah, definitely.
Yes, good. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Excellent. Are there any more questions, Johannes?
I see no more questions in the chat, so I think we can proceed.
Yeah, so we can, the next one up, I guess, is our final talk of the day, the Sitecore Experience Edge, Headless Content Delivery at Scale, by Akshay Sura. So Akshay will present Sitecore Experience Edge for Content Hub with its benefits. He will explain to us how it helps to deliver omni-channel content, and we will see in practice how to query Sitecore Experience Edge using GraphQL endpoint and GraphQL Playground. Over to you, Akshay.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for showing up today and spending your time with us. All right, so I'm just going to get started. So my name is Akshay Sura. I've been part of the Sitecore community and built the Sitecore community for the past 13 odd years, been an MVP for a long time. So if you need anything in the community, just shout out QR codes for my profiles. Today, we'll be looking at the Sitecore Experience Edge and how to deliver content at scale. First, to begin with, what is Sitecore Experience Edge? So Sitecore Experience Edge is a SaaS-based delivery layer, which can sit on top of Content Hub as well as experience management. It's meant to deliver your content to the edge CDNs, and give you access to a GraphQL endpoint so you can query all that data. Best of all, you could use it in any channel you choose to. So if a device can make a web-based call, you can absolutely use the Sitecore Experience Edge to pull the data you need. Currently, the Experience Edge is only available for Content Hub. It was released back in Feb. The experience management piece is supposed to come in soon enough. The first version, from what I know, would not expose the personalization on the experience management side, but it would be similar to the Content Hub, where it would expose all the data to a GraphQL endpoint so you can query and deliver it. What does that mean? I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially every time we do that, it gives us access to build things faster. So we're trying to support the marketing org and the entire organization in building sites, landing pages, promotional material. And this lets us basically deliver the content in an omni-channel way to an endpoint and lets the teams build using whatever they need to. It's scaled by default globally, highly performant. So if you want to build a mobile app, you could use it. If you're building it into your POS system, you could use that. So integrating shouldn't be an issue whatsoever. So from a topology perspective, the content gets pushed either from Sitecore Content Hub or experience management into these delivery networks exposed via the GraphQL endpoint. Any of your channels simply would be running GraphQL queries to these endpoints and pulling the data out to use what they need. The beauty of GraphQL is that you can pull what you need. You don't have to get a whole big payload of junk you don't need. So that makes your life a little bit easier. The API itself gets pushed in two parts. So one is a delivery API, which is all your content in the final workflow state, which you define. And it could be different based on the entity you are dealing with. So for instance, for a product, the final approval state can have a different rule set as opposed to a different type, like a blog or an author, which might have a different workflow state. Preview API basically gives access to pretty much everything you need. So keep talking about GraphQL. So let me show you a little bit about GraphQL. So before I get into that, from a Content Hub perspective, Content Hub is split into four. Basically everything to do with products, which is PCM, everything to do with the CMP, which is all the content types you can create and define the customization. So blogs, authors, news, anything you can think about, the DAM, which comes by default anyways. And then you have the MRM, which is like a Confluence/Jira for your marketing org. So you can go from ideation all the way to content creation in just one piece. That's the whole cell of Content Hub. So from a content perspective, giving us the ability to push this content in a headless delivery mode, the biggest advantage Sitecore Experience Edge has over other headless systems is not only do you have access to your CMP content, but you also get your products from the PCM, which is super, super helpful. For the intents and purposes of this demo, we'll be concentrating on products because it's a little bit easier to grasp than getting into custom types. So products are split into catalogs. You could have different catalogs. You could have products which are shared between catalogs. Product families, which are mainly categories for the best way to symbolize them. And then you have the actual products. Products can be part of different categories. We don't have that many products in here. But as you can see, with the Sitecore Experience Edge added on top of your Content Hub, you start seeing these green clouds with a checkbox in them. And then you can see that my product is in an approved state, so it made it to the delivery endpoint. Some of them are in created state, so they didn't make it to the delivery endpoint. You could define things exactly how you need it. So for instance, if you're dealing with different entities and you need to specify which entities actually make it and which entities don't, it's totally up to you. So for instance, m.asset, which is used in DAM, that's the base content type for DAM content. You can specify if it should even make it to the delivery platform or not. If it does, what are the conditions by which it would make it there? In our case, we are talking about product, which is m.pcm.product. We're basically saying, yes, push it to the delivery platform only if it meets this condition. And the rules engine in Content Hub is fairly extensive. You could write a million rules, which can get complicated. As long as you know what you're doing, it's pretty simple. Here, all we're saying is as long as the product status is set to approved, we will push it to the, we as in Content Hub Experience Edge will be used and pushed to the delivery platform. And you can set it based on, so every single entity type, you can specify if it'll make it. If it's going to make it, what are the conditions by which it'll make it? There's also this additional field called schedule delivery. So if your content type in Content Hub has a date field, you could utilize that date field as a scheduling mechanism for your content to be pushed to the delivery platform. So apart from satisfying the conditional needs, you could also use a date on that entity to do that. Saying all of that, it's a lot of info. By default, you get access to two GraphQL Playgrounds. One is for preview mode. The other one is for the delivery mode. If you go back into our products, you guys might have taken a quick glance. We have a handful of products, out of which only a few made it to delivery because of their conditions, and the rest are just sitting there. So when we run this query from a preview perspective, you'll get 13 products. I'm not going to collapse all of them. But the same thing on the delivery, you won't get 13, you would get 6 because that's all that made it. In terms of GraphQL, again, I'm not a GraphQL expert. You do not need to be a GraphQL expert. The best part about GraphQL is it's self-documenting. So when people are building this GraphQL endpoints or they're built dynamically, it documents itself. What I mean by that is I really don't have to do anything. I just have to start typing in order for me to get into any of the entities you need to get into. If you're not aware of those, like I mentioned, it's always self-documenting the way GraphQL endpoints are. This isn't anything specific Content Hub did. GraphQL endpoints all across the world follow the same pattern. So if I want to bring in all products, so I want to get all products, by default, this basically is showing me without, just common sense wise that it is pulling a collection. So it has a bunch of PCM products which have all of these attributes. So if you follow along, I want PCM products, I want everything in the results collection, and I want to pull these attributes out. And then I want assets for these products, which also is a collection because you could have more than one assets. If you look into results, and now we're getting into the assets part, you could get attributes of that specific assets, and you need public links. So you get into another collection, and you can go on, so on and so forth. So as you can go through the documentation, you could add your query pretty easily. All you would need is a token. I partially blocked my token, but you would pass a xgraph GQL token to it, which you define in your Content Hub instance. So It is super, super simple. Like I mentioned, I'm not a GraphQL expert, but I was able to build it. So if I'm able to build it, all of you should be able to build it. So coming back, so that is a little bit about GraphQL. And I often get asked, and my opinion changes along with the market, right? So we learn new things based on the market, and we figure out what is a better way to do things. And my choice at this moment in time would be to use the Sitecore Content Hub and put the Experience Edge on top of it. Gives us direct access to CMP and PCM. We get access to the DAM anyways with the public links. That gets pushed over to the delivery network. I am not a JavaScript expert, but I figured out Next.js and the best way to do things. It's routing and all of that capability, and Vercel is one of the best things ever on the planet if you're building Next.js sites. Use that and push content out. So right now, we currently have a couple of customers where we're pushing content to mobile apps, pushing content to websites, third-party syndications to distributors like Lowe's and Home Depot with products. So there's a lot of stuff you could do with this, and it's super powerful. So that's what I would pick. Again, a little bit about why. If the first two are exactly the same points, I would fill the entire screen with it if I could. Omnichannel is the best way to go. So for the longest time, we've been stuck in a very WCMS, web CMS perspective, which is great because that's where the world was. But as we grow and use the content in different places, omnichannel is the only way to go. You build your content once, deliver it as many times you want. Just by being in this headless mode, you can build it in whatever you like. You're no longer limited to .NET Core. You're no longer limited to JS. And then we have a new visitor. That's all right, Polly. So it just gives us more flexibility in terms of what we can build with. Traditionally, we've had issues where finding Sitecore resources are difficult right now with these API endpoints. If your marketing department has access to a React team, they could easily build that. You're able to turn on a dime and build solutions really, really fast. And then just by being in this mode, which is Jamstack architecture, you have the freedom to choose your own search engine. You have freedom to choose your own CRMs with embeddable forms. You're no longer restricted by the monoliths we've used in the past. Plus, just like I mentioned, the biggest sell for me for Content Hub is basically ideation to content creation. You can do the entire thing in one place, and there's no substitute for that. So that's omnichannel from my perspective. Trying to show a demo. So I'm going to show this slide for a little bit while I speak, and also try to get a couple of things up and running while I do that. So we tried coming up with a basic starter kit if you wanted to get started on Sitecore Experience Edge on Next.js, just because we believe in Next.js after we've spent over a year trying to do projects as well as trying to POC things. So it kind of makes sense for us to do that. And this code base also has quite a few things inside of it, which is all the code, all the demo which I'll be showing you today is in this code base. So there's no smoke and mirrors. You can download it. As long as you follow the directions, you should be able to have something up and running. So as long as you have a Sitecore Experience Edge instance up, you can pull the API keys out of it, plug in your URL and the API keys, you should have a running instance of this demo. Getting to the next part. So again, a lot of stuff in the past where we try doing things a little bit differently. So like when we did our demo on Universal Track a couple of years ago, we didn't want to do a POC. We didn't want to do a proof of concept. We actually bought these card readers which read cards on Con, right? The same exact way. We didn't want to do a emulation of a mobile app. We're like, screw it, let's just build one. How long would it take? It took about 4 days for us to build an app. We pushed it to both the app stores. Unfortunately, Apple was a little bit stringent. They said this app doesn't provide much functionality, which is true. I don't blame them for it. It doesn't have a lot of functionality, but we wanted to show a use case. So there's a QR code for the Android app, which is still live. You could check it out. It gives you access to the app, which I'm about to show. So let's jump into the demo real quick. All right, so as we saw before, we have a handful of products which are in the approved delivery state. We have our trusty iPhone app, which you can see it's mine. It is not magic or smoke and mirrors. Anyway, so we are in the products page. Currently preview is off, which means we're hitting the delivery network at this one, delivery API. We have 6 products in here with the data coming in. Let's do the same on the mobile app. And as you can see in the mobile app as well, we have 6 products. If I go into the preview mode on the mobile app, as well as on the Next.js site, you should see a lot more products, same over here. So what I'm going to be trying to do today is let's go into a piece of content. Let's go to a product, coconut chips. And then what we tried to do is we tried to use the information. So we're pulling the images from the DAM. We have the PCM product, which we are pulling values from, which are over here. What we wanted to do was try to use a couple of fields. So what we ran into is, for instance, long description, UG. Let me just type this in. So what we did is we used some attributes on the mobile app and some attributes on the desktop app. And there was a reason for that. So what we figured, and we've used several headless systems before, the long description currently uses rich text. Rich text is the way Content Hub stores it, is pure rich text. It's not portable JSON format. So what happens is you can't truly use that in a mobile app straight away. You have to run through a couple of different things. You have to clean it up and take out the markup from it, which becomes painful. So we didn't want to go through that. So we used a short description field for mobile, long description field for desktop. And usually when you save a piece of content, preview gets updated pretty quickly. The delivery, if you're pushing it to the delivery API, it takes about 10 seconds. So if I come back here, refresh this guy real quick, get into here and also open this. As you can see, the mobile one was updated to the value we want, and the desktop one gets updated to the value we want. We could go all day long and it won't make any difference. So we save that, give it a second, we come back, and it's pretty simple. It does its job right. And where's the mobile? Sorry, it's another window. I'm sharing my screen from my mobile app. So it's pretty decent. It gets updated pretty fast. I haven't seen any issues whatsoever. So from a delivery and then preview perspective, you can switch back and forth, and it does pull from both the endpoints pretty easily. So really wanted to showcase that. Going to the next part. Oh, and then sorry. Also there are directions for this repository. So basically you need your API keys for preview delivery and the 2 delivery endpoints for your GraphQL endpoints, and you should be able to just follow the instructions. The code itself is built, and I'll show you after the next demo. It has quite a few things built in already in order for you to have a successful project start on Next.js. If you're doing Sitecore Experience Edge, it just makes your life a little bit easier. Coming back to our presentation. So one of the things I've heard, and this actually disturbs me more than anything else, is people are a little bit ignorant when it comes to Jamstack, either because they don't have the knowledge, which is absolutely acceptable, or they're just being ignorant for the sake of being ignorant. So a lot of people say you can personalize on Jamstack. Well, that's not true. You can personalize on Jamstack. So I'll call BS on that. So there's several ways to personalize on Jamstack, which have been there for the longest time ever. So if you've heard of Optimizely, which Epi recently bought, If you've heard of Google Optimize, which also personalizes, you can personalize any site, whether it's Jamstack or not. At the end of the day, it's a JavaScript library which is on your front end, collects all these pieces of information. One of the things which proved my point better than anything else is what Sitecore did recently, which they bought Boxever. Heard Dave Flanagan speak about Boxever. I've actually played with it, released a blog post recently about it. Seems like a really good platform for customer data to aggregate it, segment it, provide analytics, as well as provide the right customer experience. Right now, we're working on a demo to actually put in Boxever into, along with Sitecore Experience Edge. So look forward to releasing the video as well as blog posts for it. Where as of this moment, I haven't worked with it enough. I've only worked on the backend part of it. So I can't really give much information out. But what you can do is you could use Uniform. So again, a lot of us are very pigeonholed into Sitecore. I was for the longest time ever. So from our end, we look at Uniform as, oh, these super smart guys from Sitecore went over and created this new company called Uniform. And then everyone knows, or a lot of people know about the Sitecore module they have, which sits on top of XM and provides personalization, which is great. I'm not talking about that Uniform. I'm talking about the Uniform, which is used it's by the same guys. It's used inside of all headless platforms we use, which is other than Sitecore. So what we did is we went over and the same demo site, we set up some personalization on Uniform, which you can do right now. You can sign up for free. You get X amount of personalization options with it. So I have a Content Hub demo. I set up personalization, set up a few intents. So once you step out of the Sitecore personalization lingo, anywhere else in the world, they're called intents and signals. So I have an intent. Each of these intents matches one-on-one with my category. So what my goal in this demo is, I want to figure out which category my user is most interested in. So I have 4 categories. So I went ahead and set up 4 intents. Each of them has 1 signal, other than Fruitful Lemonade, which has 2 signals. One is based on behavior. The other one is based on campaigns. So most of the time when you're running ad campaigns, different kind of campaigns, when you're syndicating, you'll come back to your site using a URL parameter, and we want to be able to capture personalization based on that as well. So we set that up, and now we have all the intents in the world, and we are happy with it. So we come back to our site. So the first thing I see on the site is, it says welcome. It's showing me powerful snack bars. It's showing me powerful snack bars because it recognizes that I have no preference at this moment in time because I'm in incognito. I went to the site for the first time. I'm using this handy Chrome extension for Uniform Optimize. And as you can see, it recognizes I have 4 intents and 2 signals inside of Fruitful Lemonade. And right now it doesn't know what I want. So I'm going to go into Healthful Chips. And the moment I do that, it's going to know, oh, this guy loves Healthful Chips because that's where he went to. So if I go back to the home page, it's going to show me Healthful Chips because that's what I want. So now I go into Powerful Granola. And then when I do that, it's capturing the fact that, okay, now he likes both Healthful Chips and Powerful Granola. So we could be shown anything really. At this moment, if I were to come back to the site, for instance, with a link from Google or a paid advertisement, you can see that my signal strength for Fruitful Lemonade all of a sudden went to 100, which means I love Fruitful Lemonade. So that's why it's showing me that. But if I wanted to, say, for instance, going to Healthful Chips a couple more times, you could see that my intent now is my Healthful Chips is stronger than my Fruitful Lemonade. So again, this is a very, very simple scenario. I know all of us deal with a lot more. Currently, by default, you get access to a few signal types, which you can pretty much do quite a bit of personalization with. There's a ton more in the paid version, which we use for our other customers, but it's super simple. It's easy to get it out there. From a code perspective, again, I'm not a JavaScript guy, so if I can do it, pretty much anyone can do it. So installing the uniform NuGet packages, NPM packages is super simple. You get that in there. What we ended up doing is we built a component called as product category. The goal of product category is to basically say, hey, whichever category I'm on, display those products is all it's doing. You don't need to understand the code. You don't need to see the complexity of it. But the only difference is if someone tells me to track a behavior, I'm calling uniform and saying, hey, track the behavior for this category intent tag, which is attached to our category. If they say don't track category, I'm not tracking any category. So what we are doing is on the home page, we are basically saying, I don't want to track the person's behavior because we're passing track behavior as false, but I do want you to show the personalized category is what we're doing here. But on the actual category page, what we are simply doing is, hey, I want to show the category and the products for this category, but I do want you to track the behavior. So on the homepage itself, we're not tracking the behavior to figure out which category the person likes. But on the inner pages, which is on the individual category pages, we are tracking their behavior. And again, it's super simple. It works. It just, as you can see, the speed is lightning, which is another best thing about Jamstack sites is it's just crazy fast. So that is all I got. Let me see back here. So if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer the questions. You can reach out to me on social as well if you like. If people are not willing to openly ask questions, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
That's an excellent talk. Thank you, Akshay. There was a question from Tom. I think you probably answered that. Tom, do you want to ask?
Hi guys. Yeah, I'd forgotten actually about the acquisition momentarily there, but yeah, I think it's obviously the way of travel to go down the full Jamstack solution. Yeah, I guess my question is more towards Sitecore. Is just thinking longer term. Is there still going to be the role for a kind of XDB that would potentially sit underneath all of this still?
Do you want me to answer as a Sitecore community member, or you want me to answer as someone who's representing Sitecore?
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously, I'm trying to understand if, like, how fast Sitecore's planning to go with the kind of, I guess, the best of breed solutions. Like, is it looking to provide going forwards these, the full stack? Is it still going to offer like the kind of the standalone customer data platform, for example, that would sit underneath the marketing automation services that you're buying? Or is it going to focus more just on the content? Or
yeah, I think so. I wish I was the CTO of Sitecore, but I'm not. I probably don't even wish that. But so the short answer is the market will speak the truth, right? So I feel like there is still a story for Sitecore Experience XM. There are some organizations who might want to stay on that. Some people, some organizations intentionally choose to be behind a little bit just so that things get proven out and worked out. So I can see an XP and XM still working for them. But when you look at the new acquisitions from a Boxever and 451 perspective, combined with Content Hub and the Experience Edge, I really don't see any reason. So if I were an modern organization, want to empower my marketing teams, I would choose the Experience Edge with Content Hub, Boxever, and 451 if I'm using commerce. Deliver personalization that way rather than the whole headache of XConnect. So playing with XConnect and Universal Tracker, we know the limitations, the scalability issues, just the customization problems. I would see long-term headless personalization will win over monolith, but in the short term, I think there is a use case for both of them.
Yeah, no, no, good answer. Yeah, no, it's something really pertinent at the moment that we're exploring. So yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you very much. Any more questions?
Akshay, speaking about performance, because obviously you mentioned you are seeing much faster response from your headless solution. Did you capture any metrics or did you do any comparison headless versus how it would be in our previous monolithic architecture?
Yes, and that's coming up in a couple of our marketing campaigns, which not a lot of people are going to like. But yeah, so metrics are kind of interesting, right? So what we saw was I'll give you a short example. We have a customer who's moving over to headless. Currently, they spent about $20,000 on just their production environment. And it's massive, and they still get 2 to 3 second page loads on their homepage. We are close to releasing their site on a headless mode. Costs about $7,000 a month for all their environments, which is a reduction just from a perspective of production to all environments, and it's truly headless. It loads in 200 milliseconds. So it's a night and day difference. So from a monolith perspective, I know people want to argue about cost and this and that perspective, but what happens is you could throw all the money in the world from an Azure PaaS perspective. You'll truly never be able to match like the headless delivery of a Jamstack site just because of the way it's built. So yeah, I mean, metrics wise, be on the lookout for the next couple of months. We have about 12 sites being released this year on pure headless. So we'll have plenty of metrics shown out in terms of cost of infrastructure licensing, cost of just month to month, as well as the speed.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions, guys?
If there are no more questions, then I guess we could all thank you, Akshay, and all of our other speakers for today's presentations. It was very, very interesting. The recording, as Johannes mentioned, will be published on YouTube. Johannes, over to you.
Yeah. So again, thanks all the speakers for your efforts and great talks. And Polly, thank you as well, of course, and you know, the lead Kagool for sponsoring today's event. And I believe that is then that, as they say. Be on the lookout for a tweet or a notification about the YouTube release as soon as that will be online, and we can also share the slides as well that have been used, just to you know, so you can have a reread from that. Thanks everyone for showing up, and I hope it was interesting.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wait.